So last time we talked a little bit about the archetypes in the collective unconscious, and this is sort of like a global way of looking at things, a holistic way. But I want to also talk about, what's happening on a sort of micro level. So in physics, basically, you've always had the idea of particles. Atoms actually can be broken up into smaller particles, but still you've got particles, and basically they used to just they didn't even used to exist, people didn't really know, but the idea was that these atoms would have been subject to the laws of physics just like everything else, until quantum physics came along. So at this point, we still have atoms and particles and so on, but they may or may not exist in a definite state, and they tend to follow probabilities as opposed to following the laws of physics. Okay, so that's pretty much the state of things in physics right now. But I want to connect this with the collective unconscious and so on. So that's a long-term project. I don't think we're going to do that today, but I do want to talk a little bit about another view of the micro world, the particle world, and so on. And this is somewhat based on Alfred North Whitehead's metaphysics, but not completely, because I didn't teach Whitehead's thinking because I don't know it well enough. So I don't want all the process philosophers after me saying I got it all wrong. But anyway, it was, my thinking is definitely inspired by some of that. That's one of the contributing factors to what I'm going to talk about here. So Whitehead, instead of talking about particles, he talked about actual entities. And actual entities are in the process of always becoming. So I guess so he wouldn't have thought about, I don't know how he thought about atoms, honestly, now I come to think about it. But anyway, so let's go down to the very tiniest levels. And an actual entity is a very tiny part of reality, but it makes a choice. Now, this is what I most like about Whitehead's thinking, is that everything really comes down to choices. Everything is free to make choices. So yes, you still need a God, but the God is somewhat different than the God of Christian or Jewish or Muslim history or something. So I want to talk a little bit about the God according to this way of thinking. So it's not actually all that unusual for people to think that every single thing, every particle has some aspect of like an internal nature, internal directed nature. Okay? Leibniz thought like that. So it's, there's many, it's quite acceptable to think about that. Not that everybody believes it by any means, but it's still, it has a history, a respectable history. So the way that I've come to think about it, based on Whitehead's thinking somewhat, is that every single thing in the universe is made of these tiniest particles. Whether they have a material part or not, it doesn't really matter from at this point. But each particle exists and is aware of the state of every other particle in the universe at every moment. Okay? So at this moment, every particle is aware of every other particle. Every actual entity is aware of the state of every other actual entity in the universe. Does that make any sense? It does today, because we have entangled particles. Okay? So we know there's something going on that is what we call non-local. There's some particles are entangled with each other. There's something that can be known throughout the whole universe instantaneously. Okay, I won't go into that right now, but it's not completely inconceivable from the point of view of physics right now. Okay, so, but then this moment passes. Okay, we're on to the next moment. So to get from this moment to the next moment, first of all, you have each actual entity has awareness of everything that is current, the state of the world right now, so to speak, state of the universe right now. It also has, in some sense, an awareness of like sort of the eternal goodness, the eternal state, the like Plato's forms, sort of ideals and so on. Okay, so I won't talk much about that, but basically this idea of God, according to Whitehead, comes in because to get to the next moment, every single actual entity can make a choice based on what is offered to it. So rather than it being just a sort of huge amorphous, non-differentiated choice out of, infinite possibilities, then God is that which sort of offers the next choice. Okay, so let me see if I can actually read what it says here. Okay, so each new event must take account of the many events that make up the world given for it. It must do so in some definite way, for without definiteness there is no actuality. So the form of definiteness can be derived only from the sphere of possibility, but the sphere of possibility is purely abstract, lacking all agency to provide selectively for the need of new events. There must be an agency that mediates between these abstract forms or pure possibilities and the actual world. This agency is best conceived as an envisagement of the abstract forms of definiteness, such as to establish their graded relevance to every new situation in the actual world. In sum, God is that factor in the universe which establishes what is not as relevant to what is, and lures the world toward new forms of realization. So, right. So God is not imposing the next state of the world, but God is offering. This is like a really different sort of idea. And instead of thinking of God as sort of the most perfect conceivable human or whatever, then Whitehead is, actually this isn't Whitehead, this is process theology again, which is based somewhat on Whitehead's thinking. So God is the agency, the God is part of the world, okay? You can almost think of God as within the world, but in differentiated form. And that's how I think of God, actually. Part of God. God is both, in my thinking. So, but the point is that each actual entity in the world, each particle, let's say, makes a choice to create the next, the universe in the next moment. So everything really depends on the choices made within the universe, made by the actual entities within the universe. And is this God being unaffected by the world, by the choices of the beings in the world? No, right? So yes, you have the sort of primordial God, but you also have the God that is actually engaged in the process of choice, that is engaged in the unfolding of the world, and therefore is also affected by the unfolding of the world. So this is a much wider sense of God than the monotheistic God.